During Thanksgiving dinner, I asked my family a straightforward question about a hospital letter. The moment the words left my mouth, every conversation at the table stopped cold. My dad and stepmom froze, and even Jace wouldn't look up from his plate. That reaction alone told me they'd been hiding something they never expected me to confront. The lake house dining room was loud with holiday chatter, clinking dishes, and the kind of cheerful noise families like to show off in photos. I sat there in the middle of it, feeling like a guest in my own life. Silver Ridge Lake glimmered outside the windows, but all anyone cared about was reliving Jace's iconic 30th birthday weekend at Crystal Peak Lodge fireworks. A live band, influencers crowding the deck. The whole spectacle repeated over and over like a highlight reel no one asked for. Dad carved the turkey theatrically while Renee floated around filling wine glasses. And my cousins hyped up every story, Jace mumbled, acting like his weekend was a national achievement. I kept my smile polite, hands in my lap, waiting for the moment when I couldn't pretend the room was as harmless as it looked. When everyone finally settled into their plates and the noise smoothed into an easy rhythm, I placed my fork down and spoke in the quietest tone I could manage. "Hey, did the hospital ever mail the surgery appointment letter?" The reaction was immediate. Renee's hand paused midair. Dad gave an awkward half laugh, the kind that tried to wave something off before it became real. "Oh yeah, it came," he said casually. We handled it." I asked. He nodded like it was nothing. "We used the money for Jace's birthday weekend. You saw the photos." It was a big opportunity for him. Across the table, someone muttered that the fireworks were worth every penny. And another joked about how expensive the drone shots must have been. Jace kept his head down, slicing his turkey into pieces too small to be normal. I steadied my voice. "So I guess you still don't know who actually needed that surgery." Silence dropped like a heavy curtain. The warmth in the room turned stiff, air tightening around us as if someone had shut a door no one had noticed before. Dad's face paled. Renee's eyes widened with a panic she tried and failed to hide. Jace moved his fork so slowly I could hear it scrape the plate. For a long stretch of seconds, no one breathed, no one blinked. No one dared pretend nothing had happened. Dinner limped along after that, if you could call it dinner at all. The laughter never returned. Conversations died halfway through a sentence. And everyone kept eating like they were afraid the wrong word would set something on fire. I excused myself early, slipping into the old guest room that used to be mine. Closing the door behind me to shut out the thickness of the silence, sitting on the edge of the bed. I opened my banking app not because I wanted to see the number again, but because some part of me still needed to confirm I hadn't imagined it. The trust account at Rocky Vista Credit Union blinked back at me with the same cold balance it had shown the night before. $0. Nearly $190,000 money I'd saved piece by piece. Year by year gone without hesitation, without a conversation, without a second thought. And none of them had asked a single question when I brought up the letter. Not what surgery, not why, not who it was for. They already knew. They had known for a long time. What they hadn't known was that I was finally done pretending. I didn't. If you've ever carried a family longer than you should have, keep watching, because the moment I stopped holding everything together was the moment they started to unravel. I'm Elodie Mercer, 34, living in Denver. If there's one thing I learned early, it's that families don't assign roles, they drift into you slowly, till one day you realize you become the person everyone relies on without ever agreeing to it. My dad, Douglas, raised me mostly alone after my mom passed. And when he remarried Renee while I was in college, I had already slid into the habit of figuring things out on my own. When Jace was born 9 years after Mia, late surprise for both Dad and Renee, our family shifted instantly around him. He was the bright spot, the one everyone protected, the one adults praised even when he barely tried. I didn't resent it. I just learned to live around it. What surprised me was how responsibility slowly tightened around my life without anyone naming it. It started with small things, covering a forgotten bill, helping Renee after a minor procedure, sending Dad money when hours at the mill dropped. Then came bigger asks go signing Jace's Jeep because he's still building credit, fronting the security deposit for his downtown apartment because it's good for his career, paying off a missed tuition balance so he wouldn't lose his classes. Each request arrived wrapped in urgency, apology, or flattery, and somehow I was always the one who could handle it. Meanwhile, my own life shrank without me noticing. While they spent weekends in Breckenridge or Estes Park, I sat in my one-bedroom near Capitol Hill, answering work emails at midnight, eating reheated dinners, and telling myself I'd take a vacation next year. The next year followed, then the year after that. Everything shifted. The night Jace stumbled into my apartment after a party. He barely made it to the couch before passing out, smelling like vodka and someone else's perfume. I was used to that part. What I wasn't used to was the way his hands looked swollen, red, stiff in a way that made my stomach tighten. He'd complained about soreness for months, always blaming old football stuff, but this looked different. Serious. The next morning, when he groaned awake, I told him we were going to Denver West Medical Center. "I'm fine," he muttered, rubbing his eyes. "You're not?" I said. "Get in the car." Didn't argue much. Maybe he was too hungover. Perhaps some part of him knew. Dr. Adrian Voss examined him in a way that made the room feel colder. He asked detailed questions, pressed on the joints, and watched as Jace winced even when trying to hide it. When it was over, he didn't say much, just sent off labs and told us he'd be in touch. 2 weeks later, he called me directly on my phone. "Reload," he said, calm but firm. "This is aggressive rheumatoid arthritis. His window for treatment is limited. If he doesn't begin biologic infusions within months, the damage could be irreversible." I sat in my car outside the grocery store long after the call ended, staring at nothing, letting the reality settle in. I knew what would happen if I told Dad or Renee. Immediately they'd panic, argue, minimize, or spend more energy worrying about how it affected their routines than what Jace actually needed. And Jace, he'd go into denial so deep he'd drown in it. So I did the only thing I knew how to do. I handled it myself. I met with a financial planner. I met with an attorney. And together, we set up a revocable medical trust. I was the trustee, and Jace was the sole beneficiary, with funds restricted to treatment and medical support only. Every bonus from work, every tax return, every trip I didn't take went straight into that trust. Month after month, year after year. When it finally reached almost $190,000, the amount Aurora Specialty Clinic required upfront for a year of infusions not covered by insurance, I felt a sense of relief for the first time in a long time. At least there was a plan. At least he had a chance. The trust had one emergency clause because I traveled for work more than I liked to admit. If I were ever unreachable during a true medical crisis, Dad or Renee could request a withdrawal with verbal confirmation and a follow-up email from me. It felt safe. It felt reasonable. It felt like something a family could handle with honesty and integrity. I didn't know, standing in that lawyer's office signing the papers, that the clause meant to protect Jace would later become the door they'd pry open to drain everything behind my back. At the time, all I saw was my little brother limping between influencer shoots and pretending nothing hurt, while our parents praised him for being tough. Saw a kid who needed help. So I helped, quietly, consistently, even when it chipped away at pieces of myself. I didn't realize I was giving up. The night after Thanksgiving, sleep wouldn't come. I lay on the couch in my Denver apartment with the curtains half open, watching the streetlight glow slide across the ceiling. My phone was face down beside me, vibrating every so often with group messages from cousins pretending dinner had been amazing. I didn't respond. I couldn't. Around 2 a.m, I finally picked up my phone and opened the banking app again, even though I already knew what I'd see. The trust account, Jace's medical lifeline, still sat at $0. It wasn't shocking anymore. It was a steady, hollow ache, the kind that made your chest feel too small. That morning, while I was flying home from a work trip in Salt Lake City, they had emptied the entire account. Dad, Renee? The same people who used to insist that families look out for each other. They had called my private banker, invoked the emergency clause, and forwarded an email from an address that closely resembled mine. It was enough for the banker to release everything. Almost $200,000 is gone in one transfer. I scrolled through old screenshots of the trust documents, the ones I had saved, like a safety blanket. I knew every line of the clause they used. I had written the words myself, never imagining they would twist it into something so destructive. My chest tightened when I remembered the Instagram stories Jace had posted the same weekend. He crowd-surfed in a rented lodge, neon lights glowing behind him. Champagne fountains spraying over a crowd of influencers who didn't know his name the week before. Every second of those videos was paid for by the money meant to keep him walking. I closed the app and pressed my hands over my face until my breathing steadied by late afternoon. The panic had given way to something sharper clarity. For the first time in years, I didn't rush to excuse them. I didn't try to understand their side. I didn't tell myself they meant well. All I felt was the cold. Simple truth, if I didn't draw a line now, I was never getting my life back. It was nearly midnight when the doorbell exploded through the quiet, loud enough to rattle the picture frames. I froze for a second, the kind of stillness that isn't fear but recognition. I already knew who it was. I opened the door just a crack. Dad, Renee, and Jay's hoodie up, eyes bloodshot, all three smelling like cheap bar bourbon and anger. Renee shoved past me without waiting. She slammed a stack of papers onto my coffee table. You cut off every one of Jace's supplemental cards, didn't you? Dad followed right behind her. The Jeep payment bounced. They're repossessing it in 48 hours. Jace lingered in the doorway, holding his phone like a lifeline. The apartment put a pay or quit notice on the door. I can't cover it. You know, I can't. I closed the door quietly and leaned my back against it, watching them unravel in my living room. For once, I felt utterly calm. Renee pointed at the papers. Do you have any idea how humiliating this is? His card declined in front of everyone. You made him look broke. Dad jabbed a finger toward me. You don't get to pull the plug just because you're in a mood. This family runs because you support it. That's how it works. Jace took a small step forward. Turn the cards back on, okay? I've got a sponsorship coming. 2 weeks, max. Something inside me went still, like a switch flipping. I took a slow breath. No. Renee stared at me like she didn't understand the word. X, what did you say? I said no. I'm done. No more cards. No more rent. No more anything. Dad's voice dropped into the tone he used when I was a kid, the warning tone. You don't get to walk away from your family. I met his eyes. Not walking away. I'm stepping out of a role I never agreed to. Renee's voice sharpened. You will fix this. You have 24 hours to reverse everything or you'll regret it. I walked to the door, opened it, and held it wide enough for the cold night air to sweep in. Your 24 hours start now. Get out. For a moment, no one moved. Then Renee snatched the papers. Dad's jaw locked tight, and Jay stood there looking smaller than I'd ever seen him. One by one, they stepped outside. I closed the door, turned the lock, slid the chain, and stood in the silence that followed, waiting for guilt to crush me. It didn't, not even a little dot. It was the first night in my adult life I finally felt free. Even if I had no idea what storm was coming next. For 2 days after I threw them out. The silence in my apartment felt different, less like loneliness, more like space I hadn't realized I needed. I cleaned, I worked, and I cooked for myself without rushing. For the first time in years, I didn't check my phone every 10 minutes, waiting for someone else's emergency. I didn't hear from Dad, Renee, or Jace. Not a call. Not a text. Not even one of their dramatic "we're worried" messages. The quiet felt almost suspicious, but I let myself breathe anyway. On the third evening, when I got home from work with a bag of groceries digging into my forearm, I noticed something waiting on my doormat. A thick manila envelope. No stamp, no return address, just my name typed in bold, Elodie Mercer. My stomach tightened. Packages without senders never meant anything good. I carried it inside, locked the door, and set the groceries down without unpacking them. The envelope was heavier than it looked. I slid a finger under the flap, pulled the papers out, and felt the world tilt around me. Petition for appointment of guardian of the person and estatener. Ella de Marie Mercer petitioners. Douglas Mercer and Renee Mercori stared at the page. Reread the names 3 times, waiting for it to turn into something else. Some misunderstanding, some clerical error, anything but what it was. But the documents didn't change. They wanted guardianship over me, full control, legal authority over my life, my money, even my medical decisions. A cover letter from their attorney, Richard H. Langford, lay clipped on top. 4 short paragraphs, each one cruelly dressed as concern. Paragraph 1. I had abruptly and irrationally ceased all financial support to my dependent family members. Paragraph 2. I exhibited signs of mental instability, including paranoia, hostility, and withdrawal. Paragraph 3. I posed an imminent risk of dissipating my substantial assets. Paragraph 4. If I signed the voluntary guardianship agreement attached, they would limit their involvement to financial oversight only. There was even a little blue sticker placed neatly beside my signature line, as if they expected me to sign quickly, like a form for a dentist appointment. My hands shook so hard the paper rattled. Attached behind the petition were supporting documents. Lies stacked on lies. Statements from neighbors saying I rarely left the house. Screenshots of texts I'd sent Jace telling him to get a job. A report from a therapist I'd never met, claiming she feared for my safety. A draft emergency order has been requested to freeze all my accounts immediately. It felt like drowning slow, humiliating, and quiet. I dropped into a kitchen chair, the edges of the papers digging into my palms, and the worst part wasn't even the betrayal. It was how careful they had been, how organized, how certain they were that they'd get away with it. I called the only person I trusted to think clearly when I couldn't. Claire Donovan, a contract attorney I'd worked with years ago. She answered on the second ring. Ella D. What's wrong, Claire? I need help, I said. Now, 20 minutes later, after I scanned and sent every page, she called back, her voice low but steady. They're filing under emergency guardianship statutes. If a clerk buys even part of this, they can appoint an interim guardian within hours. Sometimes the same day. My throat closed. Can they take my accounts? Yes. Can they? Put me somewhere. Claire exhaled. If the court believes their claims, yes. I pressed my knuckles against my mouth, trying not to break. How strong is their case? Weak, she said. But emergency guardianships don't need to be strong. They just need to sound urgent to the wrong clerk. She gave me her plan with the calmness of someone who'd fought monsters like this before. I needed to gather every bank record, every email, every text, proof of the trust, proof of the forged email, proof of competence in every aspect of my life. It's going to get ugly, Claire warned. They will double down. People willing to file something like this don't stop at one attempt. I closed my eyes. I'm not signing anything. Good, she said. Then we fight. That night, my kitchen became a war room. Stacks of folders covered the table. My printer groaned for hours. I scanned until my eyes burned, until the clock blinked past 3 in the morning. Every time I thought about collapsing into bed, I pictured my father's face at Thanksgiving, the casual way he carved turkey while telling me they'd spent Jace's treatment fund on fireworks, and the exhaustion turned into resolve by sunrise. My hands were cramped, my back ached, and every document was sorted and ready. I sealed a thick envelope addressed to Langford, the attorney, orchestrating the entire operation. Inside, I placed one sheet of paper. Nothing more. See you in court. When I dropped it in the outgoing mail slot, my pulse finally steadied. They wanted control. They wanted silence. They wanted me cornered. But I wasn't the girl who quietly paid their bills anymore. I was someone they'd taught without meaning to survive without them, and the fight had only just started. Snow. In Denver has a way of swallowing sound, turning the world into something muted and far away. The night the storm rolled in, I had just dragged myself home from the grocery store. Arms aching, fingers numb, still replaying Claire's warnings in my head. The air felt too cold, too still. When I reached my door, something white caught my eye, unofficial. Envelope taped flat across the frame, with a red stamp from my employer's HR department. I didn't even get inside before tearing it open. Immediate termination of health. Coverage due to fraudulent claims totaling $47,000. The pages behind it listed 7 itemized bills: psychiatric holds, detox admissions, and suicide watch. Facilities I had never set foot in. Dates I could account for down to the hour. Forged electronic signatures that looked frighteningly like mine. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Fraudulent claims meant investigation. Investigation meant questions. Questions meant evidence, even fake evidence they could use in the guardianship hearing. Someone had submitted these claims through the provider portal using my member ID, my date of birth, and my digital signature. Only 2 people, besides me, had access to the old insurance documents. Dad and Renee. My hands shook as I dialed the insurance carrier. Then I waited 43 long minutes before a supervisor finally picked up. "Ma'am," she said, reading each claim slowly. These were submitted from a single IP address registered to a residential account in Lakewood. My chest tightened. I knew that address. I had memorized it before I ever moved out. It was the house where I grew up. I ended the call with fingers so cold I barely felt the phone screen. I stood on the porch for a long minute, snow soaking into my jacket, then forced myself inside, locked the door, and leaned against it just to stay upright. The exhaustion wasn't usual tired, it was something heavier, like resignation mixing with fury until I couldn't tell the difference. I didn't even have time to sit down before someone started pounding on the door hard, loud enough to shake the hinges. I flinched and rushed to the peephole. 2 police cruisers, lights flashing, red and blue reflecting on the snow. I opened the door a crack. "Ms. Mercer." The officer asked. "We received a 911 call from a family member reporting you were inside attempting suicide. Caller reported screams, glass breaking. We need to come in for a welfare check." My voice barely worked. "I'm alone. I was at the grocery store. I just got home." The officer nodded like she'd heard the same story 100 times. "Policy requires visual confirmation. It'll just take a minute." I stepped aside. Snow blew in behind them as 2 officers entered, checking the bedroom, opening closets, shining flashlights in the bathroom, looking under the bed. Their boots left melting footprints on the hardwood. One of them radioed in, subject located conscious, no injuries, no weapons, no indicators of self-harm. The lead officer handed me a refusal of transport form. My signature shook. Before she stepped out, she paused on the threshold, snow swirling around her hat. "You want to tell me who's doing this?" I let out a short, bitter laugh. "My parents." She didn't look surprised. "You get a lot of those calls. Next time they try this, call me directly." She pressed her card into my palm and walked back into the storm. I stood there for a long moment, freezing air creeping through the doorway until I finally forced it shut. Then I slid the chain, pushed a chair under the knob, and collapsed onto the couch, still wearing my coat. My boots soaked the rug as I opened my laptop with numb, shaky fingers. The insurance portal page refreshed. My platinum plan. Canceled under fraud investigation. 7 fake psychiatric. Admissions. Almost $50,000 in fabricated claims. And now a police report to support concern for my mental state. They weren't just trying to win. They were determined to succeed. They were trying to destroy every piece of stability I had. One step at a time. Documented. For the first time in this whole nightmare. Fear hit me, not the sharp kind, but the slow, sinking kind that feels like a cold hand closing around your ribs. They wanted me incompetent on paper. They wanted me to be unstable. They wanted evidence they could point to in court. And the terrifying part, they were close. I curled up on the couch, still in my coat, still shaking, and stayed there as the wind rattled the windows. At some point, I must have dozed off because when I opened my eyes, the sky outside had turned the color of dirty snow. My hands were clenched around the business card the officer had given me. Detective Kleinette edges pressed into my palm like proof I wasn't imagining any of this. That night, exhaustion and fear finally carved something new into me, something more challenging, sharper. They wanted me cornered. They wanted me helpless, but all they did was push me into my next move. Spring arrived in Denver the way it always does, sudden, bright, almost cruel in how normal it felt compared to what my life had become. For weeks after the fake insurance claims and the welfare check, I lived in a strange, in-between place, working during the day, gathering evidence at night, and sleeping in short, uneasy stretches with Detective Klein's card on the nightstand like a lifeline. My world had shrunk to documents, screenshots, timestamps, and Claire's steady voice telling me we could fight this if we stayed ahead of them. I didn't hear from my family. Not one word. That silence didn't comfort Emmy, too, warned me. People who go that far don't disappear. They regrouped. One warm April afternoon, I stopped by the Englewood grocery store. I was rolling my cart toward the parking lot when a man in a wrinkled gray suit stepped directly into my path. Elodie Mercer. I didn't answer, but he handed me a thick white envelope with the red Arapahoe County seal already loosened by the wind. "You've been served." My stomach dropped. I leaned against my car and opened it right there, summons. In Guardianship of Elodie Marie Mercer. Hearing. Date, April 28th. Courtroom 3. My hands went cold as I flipped through the pages. 11 witnesses. 11. A psychiatrist claimed he treated me for a psychotic break. Social worker alleging I refused entry and threatened. Self-harm. 3 former coworkers insisted I hoarded medication and talked about ending things. 2 neighbors from addresses I'd never lived at are describing me. Screaming at night, a barista said I collapsed, sobbing in a cafe. Not all affidavits are notarized on the same day. Every signature is suspiciously similar. Every statement paints me as a danger to myself and others, and worse, someone who abandoned her dependent family members, supposedly leaving them unstable. I drove straight to Claire's office, the envelope rustling like a trapped bird on the passenger seat. She spread the papers across her conference table, marking them with highlighters like she was dissecting a crime scene. "Elodie," she muttered, "this is orchestrated." Same notary. Identical phrasing. Paid witnesses. She pointed at a line, 3 affidavits shared word for word. Subject stated she would rather die than continue supporting family. Claire pulled up the North Carolina, Colorado Guardianship Manual on her laptop. Guardianship hearings here are bench trials. One judge decides everything. If she believes even 30% of this, she can appoint an interim guardian on the spot. They could freeze your accounts before lunch. My throat tightened. How do we stop it? "We don't just stop it," she said, sliding a thick counter motion toward me. "We bury it." You'd already subpoenaed the notary's logbook she had requested. Footage from the cafe that the barista mentioned she had obtained. My HR attendance records showing I was at work during every supposed episode. 2 witnesses had already cracked under pressure from detectives admitting they were paid $500 each to sign whatever they were given, but the most significant blow came last. He agreed to testify, Claire said. Who? Dr. Adrian Voss. My breath caught. He'll disclose everything: Jace's diagnosis, the treatment window, the trust, the forged email, all of it. Under oath. For the first time in months, something inside me eased. Not relief, but the sense that maybe, just maybe, the truth finally had weight. The next 3 weeks blurred together. I lived inside folders and binders. I labeled every document. I practiced questions until my voice steadied. I walked the courthouse hallways during my lunch breaks to memorize the location of Courtroom 3A, as if preparing for battle required knowing every step of the terrain. On the morning of April 28th, Denver glowed with early spring dogwoods blooming pale pink along the courthouse walkway. I wore the navy suit I bought at 24 for job interviews, the one I never imagined would be part of a fight for my own autonomy. Inside, the air smelled like old wood and cleaning polish. Dad and Renee sat at the petitioner's table, dressed too formally, looking smaller than I remembered. Their attorney, Langford, kept straightening his tie. And behind them, hood up, face unreadable, sat Jay scrolling his phone like he was waiting for a dentist appointment. Not the hearing that could cost me my freedom. Judge Ramona Haley entered at exactly 9. Everything in the room went still. What they didn't know I finally did was that the moment she called the first witness, their entire plan would start to fall apart. The moment Judge Ramona Haley took the bench, the courtroom felt like it shifted, tighter, colder, as if the walls themselves were waiting to see how far my own family would go. She adjusted her glasses, glanced at both tables, then nodded, double quotes, "Mr. Langford, you may begin." He stood with a practiced heaviness, voice syrupy with false concern. "Your Honor, this is a case of a daughter in severe decline. Our only goal," Claire rose instantly. "Your Honor, this is a coordinated attempt at financial exploitation. We request dismissal with prejudice and criminal referral." Judge Haley held up a hand, eyes sharp. "Call your first witness, Ms. Donovan." Claire didn't look at me. She didn't have to. She already knew I was ready. "The respondent calls Dr. Adrian Voss." The side door opened, and Adrian stepped in wearing a charcoal suit and a calmness that settled the chaos inside me. He took the oath, straightened the red folder he carried, and sat. Claire started simple. "Dr. Voss, state your relationship to Jace Mercer." "I am his rheumatologist," Adrian answered. "I diagnosed him with aggressive rheumatoid arthritis 11 months ago." A whisper rippled through the gallery. Renee's shoulders jerked. Dad went stiff. Claire continued, "And the recommended treatment?" "Immediate biologic infusions. Ideally within the first 12 months, delay increases the risk of irreversible joint destruction." Valerisari ran a shot to her feet. "Objection. That's private medical." Judge Haley brought her gavel down once. "Sit down." Overruled. Adrian opened his folder. "Ms. Mercer," he nodded, "toward me created a revocable trust containing $178,000 exclusively for Jace's medical care. The funds were withdrawn without her consent to pay for a private lodge rental, fireworks, and entertainment for Jace's 27th birthday. The projector lit up behind him, bank records, the forged email, the transfer receipt, invoices from the lodge, the band, and the fireworks company." Dad's face drained of color. Renee's mouth wobbled like she couldn't decide whether to speak or faint. Jace finally looked up from his phone, blinking like he didn't understand the numbers glowing on the screen. Adrian delivered the final blow with no anger, just truth. Because the treatment window closed 4 months ago, Jace now faces permanent disability and lifelong pain management. The funds spent were his only realistic chance at preserving joint function. Jace stood halfway, voice cracking. "Mom, Dad, what did you do?" Neither answered. Claire pivoted. "Your Honor, we now submit exhibits 32 through 44. 11 affidavits appeared on the monitor. Then the recantations. 2 witnesses admitted that they were paid $500 each to sign statements written on their behalf. Camera footage from the cafe showed that I was never there. My HR logs prove I was at work during every so-called episode. The notary's logbook was empty on the dates the affidavits claimed she notarized. 11 signatures. Langford stammered something about miscommunication. But Judge Haley had already stopped listening. She read silently for several minutes while the rain hammered the courthouse windows. Then she set the papers down, hands folded, expression unmovable. After reviewing the evidence, she said, voice steady as steel, "This court finds no credible basis for guardianship. The petition is frivolous, filed in bad faith, and supported by coordinated perjury, forgery, and financial manipulation." Renee whimpered. Dad locked his jaw so hard the tendons stood out. Judge Haley continued, "The petition is denied with prejudice. All filing fees and the respondent's attorney fees will be assessed against Douglas and Renee Mercer personally." She lifted her gavel again. Furthermore, under Colorado Revised Statutes 1514311 and the 18th of May 102, this case is referred to the district attorney for criminal investigation. The room erupted, gasps, whispers, movement. Two bailiffs approached my father and Renee. Dad tried to stand but stumbled. Renee broke into panicked sobs. Jay sat frozen, staring at the fireworks invoice that now represented the end of his mobility. Adrian stepped down from the stand and gave me a slight nod, quiet, respectful, final. I didn't move until the courtroom emptied. Storm outside had quieted, but inside me, something else had finally settled. Not triumph, not revenge, just relief. The kind that comes from surviving something you never should have had to face alone. Life. After the hearing didn't snap back into place, it reshaped itself. Jace's flare-ups worsened. By summer, he struggled to lift a coffee mug. By fall, he walked with a cane. Disability benefits became his only income. He avoided me, maybe out of shame, maybe out of fear of hearing the truth one more time. Dad and Renee held out 91 days before the sanctions crushed them. Their house went into foreclosure before Christmas. I didn't return their calls. Not one. I sold my Denver place, paid off the last of my debt, changed my number, and moved to Charlotte. New apartment. New job. New name at work, Marie. Something clean. Something unclaimed by the past. However, I returned to Denver once more on closing day to hand over the keys. The house where Thanksgiving unraveled felt smaller than I remembered. I walked through quietly living room, kitchen. The hallway where I used to rush to save everyone but myself. On the porch, I took one last breath of the cold Colorado air. Somewhere in the city, my family was learning that actions have consequences. As if when you convince yourself they shouldn't, I felt no guilt. No victory, just completion. I got in my car, rolled the windows down, and drove until the Rockies disappeared behind me. Here's what I know now. Choosing yourself isn't betrayal. It's survival. And sometimes the people who taught you to carry everything are the same ones you are meant to finally put down.